You have all of this. It kind of propelled you to become a writer. I guess the next question I have for you is, okay, you're giving me all of that, but you got to tell me, how did you get started? Because so many people say, I'm afraid to try. I'm afraid to do. What was the impetus to get you to say, not only am I going to write something, I'm going to take the risk of letting somebody read what I write, and the potential for rejection.
Oh, okay.
If they don't like.
That's a good question. I'm not stalling. Okay. So there's two major things. And the first one is the little bit of advice that I'm going to give everybody who doesn't know how to start. And don't worry, it's not something that could go on a live, laugh, love board. We're not talking about that. I'm talking about the day in 1997.
Dun, dun, dun.
The early days of the internet, when I was little. Going on to one of the very first internet role-playing boards and starting to RP. It was by email chain, because message boards were not really a huge thing yet. It was role play. It was writing collaboratively back and forth with people like the Earl of Florida, and crafting stories back and forth with people. And, you get a good story going, you're in whatever land it was. Like, it was either Star Trek or Star Wars. It always was.
Okay.
For me, it started with Star Trek, and then I moved over. So it's like, I'm OG with a lot of these guys when it comes to Star Wars RP. Yeah, wow, indeed. And there's already this world built for you. So it absolves a lot of that. It does not all of it, because there's obviously still room for a lot of creativity there.
Especially back then.
Yeah, back then we were still writing a lot of our own material and going, oh my goodness, the Achani. We know all of 5 things about the Achani. They exist, they hate Mandalorians, they don't wear armor, and they talk through hitting each other. Okay, let's make a culture. Yeah, like, let's make a culture out of that.
That sounds like an ex-girlfriend. Anyway,
the views expressed on the following show do not necessarily represent those of YouTube or Midnight Magic Music. Continue on.
So the Achani, they practice a form of like vocabulary and language through sparring, like through physical combat, not like hitting each other, like martial arts. So I started writing. And when you're writing with people like that, all of a sudden everybody's excited. Or, some people are excited and everyone else is like, oh my God, okay, I guess I got to post. When you would get those moments where you'd have someone like back in the day, Earl and I would just be going like this. And it's like post after post after post. And all of a sudden you realize for the last 4 hours, you've been churning out thousands of words every hour.
This woman would write novellas. and I started writing back in 2001 on the roleplay boards after Phantom Menace kicked things off really strongly for Star Wars. And by the time I got to the site where we started writing with Sapha, I was still at this point, I can say I was still a novice. I was like, 3 paragraphs. Then I'm like,
now
I would have these like
paragraphs. Were you holding yourself to the 4-sentence rule?
Anyway,
I see. Okay, all right.
At that point, one sentence was a paragraph, except it was like 400 words. It was just
run-on
one paragraph.
Sentence. Got it. Okay, continue.
So I mean, so she may say that that got her going, but she doesn't realize that, like, even for myself. Herself, and there were a few others that were very, very good writers as well, that they're the ones that said, okay, I got to up my game. My work counts crap. I'm showing, I'm telling, not showing, Miss Sapha Burnell, and so, And so I learned a lot from her. I'll never admit it. This will soon be deleted in 5, 4, 3.
Oh no, clip it. We need to put this everywhere.
This message will now self-destruct. I'm sorry.
But that was the thing. That was the environment. And like, Earl is so right. You know, he's so right about that. And like, you'd get into a thread with a bunch of people and you'd keep goading each other on to be better. And not only that, but you knew you had a limited amount of time, but it was almost like it was fun because you knew on the other end of that screen, there were people waiting to see what you were going to do. And sometimes they were not nice about it. That was part of it too, obviously. But it created this environment where you were just excited to tell stories. And was it the best writing in the world? No, not always. That doesn't matter. But it always improving. I think of it kind of like those times were like literary improv.
Okay. All right. Interesting way of putting that. Yeah.
And we were all improving together and finding the synthesis of stories. And it would end up gravitating towards some people more than others because some people had a style that you could actually jive with, and their characters didn't make you want to stab, a pencil in your eye. Don't do that. Just a public service announcements. Do not do that.
Not pens, pencils.
The more you know. Right.
No, half the battle.
Yes, indeed.
But, it created this environment where you were just hungry for more storytelling. And so really that is where, when I was, back in those days of 2001 and all that, I was writing over 10,000 words a day.
And that's a lot.
No kidding. Yeah, I struggled to get my paper done in college, and you're over there dropping 10,000 words
10,000 words a day is, for those who don't write a lot, it's like, oh, that's, no, if you can write 1,500 words a day that actually matter, you're doing great. So 10,000 words a day is a lot, and it's good.
And you could finish a novel in a week.
Oh yeah.
That's basically what you're doing. You could finish an entire draft of a novel in a week if you did 10,000 words a day.
Yep.
Because a novel's around 70,000 and up.
Okay.
So I was voracious. And I'll admit I was also like, come on, where's the post? Like I was constantly like, Earl, where is it? Where is it? I do, because I knew that like with Earl, and with a lot of other ones of us, like if the thread languished for a few days, it was gone.
Right.
And so there was that almost immediacy of that type of writing. And this is where it hugely differs from writing a novel, because a novel is not immediate. A novel is something that you spend a lot more time with. At least it should be. Where's that novel?
This segment brought to you by Hall's Cough Medicine.
Hold on.
Your coughing needs.
I've got my not sponsored, but call me Fisherman in my streams on at Usurper Kings. That's my social media handle everywhere. I'll be streaming on Twitch and things like that, and people send me some of my fans and subscribers will send me some Fisherman's friends to keep me going. So literally right here on my desk. But a thread, the second you lost that magic, you lost that immediacy of it. It was like all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I have to post this.
Yeah.
And you just sit there and you'd be like, and fade to black, moving on. And you'd move on. You could not stay in that moment. So it was great training to get you excited for work. But when it came to the actual discipline of being able to finish a complete story without having those moments where you're like, and chapter 4. It's like, but what happened to the rest of chapter 3? Like, where did it go?
You missed it. When? Just then.
Just now.
When did it become now?
The building. Like, you're not seeing it again. It's never going to happen. So it was these strokes of magic. And you really get to learn who you are as a creator when you're like, holy crap, this person goes to sleep in 15 minutes. I better be finished my post in 12. My keyboard, you can probably see, there are a whole bunch of the letters that are missing.
Yes.
Because I type so many words a day.
And I can show my keyboard. I can show you my keyboard, but half the letters are missing because I'm like, no, that's crap.
I've seen it in person. He's not exaggerating.
I believe it.
I have 3 right now.
Yeah, it's now I do it. But so that was one. And so for anybody who wants to get into writing, find a non-toxic, good luck.
That turns out,
RP community, and find some people that you jive with and just write.
And I would like to point out though, like when we were doing our threads, we're working on our characters, we're, emotions, action, drama, but and we couldn't wait to read what the other person wrote. But it was. I didn't find out for a while until people had mentioned, because we were on different chats, we're like, we love reading that character, and I was like, what? And you go back and go, holy crap, 451 views. What's going on here? So that also, even though when we were writing threads, it wasn't about anybody else. It was about our characters and what's going on. It was satisfying and a bit of thumbs up, guys, when people are like, we follow your threads. And so with Sapha, even with certain of her, because we have different characters, I would read her characters because I love her writing style. I love how she brings the character to life, shows their emotion, but also shows their mindset, because they can be hurt and torn up inside, but on the exterior, they have to be, a bad mojo, and so you can't show the tears or the cracks in the veneer, what she feels inside. Mm-hmm. You see this person that's going to cut your head off because you looked at her or something. So I mean, she was one of the first ones that I actually followed. Followed, stalking, whichever way you want to put it. But
tomato, legal entanglements.
But I actually was doing that before I found out that she had dropped a book, and I was like, what? Let me go read this. And
she dropped the book like it fell out of her lap? Or?
Well, I think I actually mentioned it because I always separated my professional career from my RPing, because RPing was something that I was doing for enjoyment. It was something I was doing to hang out with my friends and have some community and just kind of be around people, because, being an author is very lonely. And so was my career before. I took a break from the performing arts. I did film school, and I was working towards becoming a producer, and then that sort of fell apart a little bit.
But you can see some of that in some of her YouTube commercials or trailers for books or whatnot. Mm-hmm. You'll check that out when we add the links. Check out the links.
And then I think one day I was going to a writers union convention or something, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be on the road. And we're like, oh, well, I'm going to, and everything. And they're like, wait a minute, what? And I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, this is my first book. This is a poetry collection, Usurper Kings, which is where I get my my moniker everywhere on social media. It's Usurper Kings is the name of my first book. And it's a collection of poems basically about the feminine through time, from hunter-gatherer all the way to futurist existential singularity, kind of, a very transhumanist kind of view of what could potentially happen to the human race. And so that stuff was happening and all this kind of stuff. And I was working on Neon Lieben, and I was working on the Lieben cycle. And then there's another novel in the Lieben cycle that I got ready for my editors. And it was like, this is going to be the first one. It's going to be great. And they're like, great, write us the first one. And I'm like, F you. And,
that was the first one.
Yeah, that was the first one. They're like, no, dude, that's like book 4 or 5. Like, no, go back and write the first one. We need to know what happened to Lieben and Adrastos first. And it was like, no. It took several more years. So that first one that Ray's talking about there was Hedonism Wholesale Link, which is going to be coming out in a couple of years, but then it eventually evolved into me writing Neon Lieben. And that one was eventually released in 2021. But, I had kept things separate because I wanted to, and I wanted to kind of compartmentalize a little bit and to just relax. And then it came out that, I was, working in the publishing industry, and I was an author, and I was a published author, and I'm like, what? Record scratch? All of a sudden the game stops playing. Yeah. And everything's silent, and they're like, oh, he says he doesn't like you. And you're like, oh, and it sort of slowly came out, but it only came out to a couple people because everyone else was just, but it was like that. It was absolutely like that. You would look at the message boards by this point, and certain threads with different characters and different storylines, they would have thousands of views.
Yeah.
Thousands. So people were either like multi-clicking every day and reading a whole bunch of stuff. People were rereading material, but there were hundreds of people looking at these threads. And not only these threads, but reading the entire storylines over multiple threads. And
going back and rereading stuff.
Yeah, and you would have these character bios where you'd link all the threads that you did. Or at least I would. I would do this.
My whip blind.
You know, and my character bios would be like, you know, thousands of bytes long because of all these links to all these threads we were doing. You know, I'd be doing 27 threads at a time. Because you know, we were also running the Mandos there for a while on this one site we were on, and
he was running the Mandos. I was waving the flag and stabbing people.
Yeah, I was herding the Mandos.
The cats.
The
Forced
animal. And so, but you get a feel for what people were interested in. You know, you get a feel for what kind of storylines people were willing to become invested in. And I think for me too, it was really good to know how far one could go before you lose the plot, before you lose the tone. Because writing, especially when you're character driven like I am, can go into melodrama so quickly. And the second you go, like this is something that I teach in my Twitch streams and things like that. You know, there's the major two things that I learned from basically the collaborative improv that is role playing. Number one, controlling perception versus reality. Because you have the perceptions of the characters and you have the reality that the reader knows for themselves. And authors need to control, those two separate things, you know, and like using your setting to show the perception of a character, because everybody can walk into completely the same room and get totally different responses and totally different views from it and things. So perception versus reality. And then you have to take tension in waves. If all you do is scream, people will eventually shut off your music.
Right.
I mean, I love me some, I love me some really good Norse metal. Like I do. I love Samhain. I'm a huge Flesh God of Apocalypse fan, and Flesh God Apocalypse is Italian, but they're fantastic. They're really heavy metal. You know, Cannibal Corpse, Samhain, like the whole thing. Like, give me really heavy music. Like, I love it. But the thing I love about Flesh God Apocalypse is for every song that they've got the like roar and like the juniper levels of like exactly. You okay there?
You might want to have some of that magical water we were talking about earlier.
They also have bridges which let you calm down, which let you have that space, which let you have that moment of like, you know, a roller coaster can't just be falling off a cliff.
Right.
You know, and so you learn how people are reacting to something, because the second that you go too far, people start to laugh. People start to laugh or they clock out. They either clock out or they start to laugh, because eventually the human organism, our fantastic brains that we've been given, they will protect us. Well, you know, what's the old line? What was it from like Apple Dumpling Gang or something? Like, when the good Lord was handing out brains, he gave yours with a teaspoon and someone jiggled his arm.
That is probably the first time the Apple Dumpling Gang has been mentioned on this channel across all shows.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
I do know what she's referencing, because my grandma who raised me, I did see that, much like the Shaggy Dog and the Incredible Mr. Limpert and all of those wonderful Disney movies that no one remembers. But you're amongst friends here, so you're okay.
Don Knotts era.
Yes, exactly.
Know, Apple Dumpling Gang. Watch the scene where they're trying to get the ladder out of the firehouse, and then realize when you see this, Don Knotts and what was it? Don Knotts and Dan Aykroyd, or Don Knotts and who was the other guy?
It's been so long.
Anyway, so for those of you who don't know, Don Knotts was, you know, Barney Fife, Deputy Barney Fife in the Andy Griffith Show. And, you know, he was just kind of known for being ridiculous. And they did the Apple Dumpling Gang. And there's this one scene where the two kind of comic relief characters were trying to like steal from the bank, but they needed to get a very big ladder out of the firehouse. And Don Knotts and his, you know, comedy buddy, they had like 5 days on the set alone.
Now that was Tim Conway, right? Tim Conway.
There we go.
Okay. Yep.
Tim Conway. There we go. They had 5 days or so to choreograph that. And they basically spent that entire time alone on set drinking with nobody around. And so when it came time to shoot, they had planned nothing. And that entire scene is improv.
Wow.
And the crew were killing themselves laughing, trying not to ruin the takes because it was so good. So if you want to see some of the world's best improv that's ever been recorded, that one scene from the Apple Dumpling Gang, I would say that's the one scene worth seeing. Anyway, getting back on topic when it comes to improv and levels.
Anywho,
People will burst out laughing. They will break that tension themselves if you don't break it for them.
Yep.
And so being able to spend that time in an environment where, there's people just hanging out and kind of like, they don't care if they hurt your feelings. They're just going to say what they're going to say. Finding out what's too much, what's too far emotionally, what's too far imagery wise, but also just what's too far. Like you get to the point where you're like, unless that character is Darth Vader, having somebody with like quadruple amputee, lost his wife and children, burned at the stake, like all these things, you list all of these different detriments, and that's how we get Darth Vader. Like, unless that character is Darth Vader, it's going to be really difficult for somebody to be like, okay, how much did you put this person through? I think we all hear those adages as authors of like, oh my goodness, this author must love this character because this character was born to suffer. And that's partially true. Like, again, I'm going to be like, so Carrie Buffison, in this, but you learn that, and this is something that I've said quite often, again, out there and about, for every valley that I bring a reader to, for every one of those deep moments of sorrow or catharsis or anger or anything powerful I'm going to bring a reader to, I'm going to bring you to a mountain afterwards.
Okay.
And then put you off.
Yeah.
Drop kick them right over the edge.
Drop kick you over the edge.
Yeah, we covered that earlier.
It's okay. You have a pack on, but you won't find out till halfway down if it's a parachute or if it's just a knapsack.
And then at the bottom there looks like there's it looks like there's one of those big gigantic fluffy mats to land on, but it's just a sponge.
Right. Yeah, sucks to be you.
SpongeBob.
Okay, Squidward. All right, it's enough.
Exactly. But
you put yourself out there though. I mean, and you mentioned it in the day in which we live, we have a lot of toxicity. But even maybe prior to this, going back a few years, people are still going to speak what they think. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's corrective and beneficial. Sometimes people are just having a bad day and just run off at the mouth. And in some cases, they're never going to accept what you're doing. They just don't see the vision that you see. How do you, as an author, especially as a burgeoning author at the time, how did you deal with criticism of your work, which obviously you put a lot of time, thought, and effort into?
Don't listen to it.
There you go.
At the beginning, not well. I'll be the first person to say that, like, when people were mean, I was like, oh, and, I would go to my cabal of friends and be like, this person was mean to me. And it was like, I did not know how to deal with it in a healthy manner, but I was also a child of like 20 years old trying to figure life out. And I'd spend most of my time on a stage or in some form of academic environment or doing charity work in various West African nations. And I had no idea how to people. So basically what happened was it came to a point where my older brother was like, oh my gosh, read these books. And he gave me this stack of like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Art of Conversation, all of these books that he got in his business classes about how to people. Right. And I learned interpersonal communications. And I started absolving myself of reacting as much. Of course I did react. Like there were times I got way too passionate about things and needed to take like a freaking chill pill, which, the equivalent of a chill pill in the RP world was leave your computer, go away, go touch grass.
AFK.
Yeah, go touch grass. You know, like
what is this you're speaking of? Walking away from the screen, letting it go? What is this?
This was before you had the phone where you could take it with you.
Oh, I was wondering what
you
manner
could
of
walk away from the
this
computer.
was.
Like now, it's like I'm walking away.
As you're typing as you go, yes.
So yeah, and so I needed to learn how to take that criticism, and I needed to learn that your audience isn't everybody, and you have to be very particular. And so the first time now, when I look at criticism and things, the first thing I do is I look and see who's criticizing.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to typecast anybody, but if somebody who, and this has actually happened to me, I got a beta read on Neon Lieben actually from a lovely person who was just like, oh yeah, I'm an author too. And like, let's beta read each other's work. And the whole thing, you're wheeling and dealing and you're trying to make sure that you get known a little bit. And so I was like, oh, sure, that'd be great. Like, I would love to see your feedback on Neon Lieben. He's like, I read 2 chapters and I gave it up because you and your effing intellectuals. Oh my gosh. Don't you know that you're never going to succeed in life unless you write like Stephen King and John Grisham? Don't you know that nobody reads anything past a grade 5 reading level? Like, what are you doing? Oh my goodness, you're just like my son. My son left me to go to university and better himself. And he thinks he's better than me now. And like, I didn't need that education. And like, I got reamed by this guy. Earl is dying.
How dare you? How dare you be like his child? What's wrong with you?
And so he absolutely like took me to task for not writing a book that would have been like a Grisham novel or a Stephen King book. And this is a work of cyberpunk. It is genetic, and it's actually on the bestsellers list on Amazon for cyberpunk, genetic engineering science fiction, and space marine science fiction.
There's a reason why.
Yeah,
it's good.
I like it. I love my book.
She's partial to it. She should be.
I should. Well, it's kind of my thing. If you can't celebrate your books, then get off the stage.
I mean, I have a little bit of inside information on it. She put a lot. She researched because if you read it, it's stuff that doesn't exist yet, but what exists now and what she created, it connects, because it's realistic and it's scientific and so she put a lot of research into it, and you can tell because as you're reading it, you're like, I believe it. Some books you read and they're like, oh, he waved his hand and he's like, oh Lord, I can't do this. But you're reading and even the scientific aspects of Neon Lieben, and we're not supposed to be talking about Neon Lieben, but it pulls you in because you're like, you're learning how it goes, and that's how she takes everything, whether it's character building, world building, murdering, people.
In the books.
In the books.
Thank you for clarifying. I'd rather her not. I'd rather her not get a visit from the RMP.
But I mean, she's very methodical and driven, to make sure she can grasp all the aspects so that she can show, not tell, not what, and it sucks you in, it pulls you in, whether it's technology or if it's mystical, magical realms with mythology and gods and little baby gods.
Yeah. And that was the thing with Neon Lieben too, is what took so long to write was, my initial research had been 8 years before 2021, because this was published in 2021. And that's why I brought it up, because you want to know how I got used to criticism. I published this, buddy. And I got that criticism from the guy and I was just shocked. And then I got criticism from another person that I thought I knew quite well. And Neon Lieben has some characters in it who happen to be queer, and I had somebody be like, what are you doing? Don't you know that people are going to put the book down? Don't you understand that is going to make people like throw your book away? Like, what are you doing? Why are there queer people in your book? I'm like, because they exist. Like, what kind of, why is the sky blue? Like,
that's what you get hung up on, not a robot.
A robot takes over the world and you're like, oh my gosh, that person's in a throuple and they're queer. And it was a fairly liberal person who said this to me, and I was like, and they went so far as to say, don't you know that you need to now put that in the LGBTQ genre because you have a gay character in it? And I was just like, that's not how it works.
That's not,
that's not how it works. No, like, I'm sorry, that's no. But it was those kinds of statements. And I started really having to look for, one, who am I writing this for? And so if your target audience, because I'm sorry, if you are a writer and you just want to write stories and you want to have fun with your friends, you go for it. Don't worry about any of this. If you want to be an author, that means you want to be somebody who is commercially viable. You want to make some money. You want to have this as a profession. Okay, listen up. You need to know who you're writing for.
Yep.
You cannot write for everybody. It's impossible. There is no story on this earth or any of the multiversal worlds that could possibly happen ever that is for every single person, and every single person would enjoy. Not even Winnie the Pooh, not even some of those classic stories of our childhood, not even Optimus Prime's magnum opus in Transformers movie. Like,
and with that, we're done. We're done. We don't take that type of blasphemy on this show. We're sorry. No.
But like, there's no story that will appeal to everyone. And so you have to know who your story is for. And if you don't know, that usually means you have to do more research on yourself and on your narrative. And so who's your story for? Where are those people? Where do they hang out? Go to those places. And then if those people, and like, not to say that other people can't enjoy my books, but if like people who love the cyberpunk genre are looking at Neon Lieben and going, ugh, what the heck are you doing? And then I've got a problem.
Yeah.
I've got to take a look at myself and I've got to figure out what's going on. But if like this wonderful gentleman who thought he was being so helpful to tell me that I needed to give up all of, the dreams of my life because I needed to write at a grade 4 reading level with 500 word chapters with thrillers based in the real world, that's not my genre. Well, and it's okay for me to say, you know what, you're right. If I was going to write a best-selling thriller that's meant to be consumed by people at airports and people who are bored in the grocery store looking in line and going, oh, look, it's $6, and put it in their cart for a little bit of titivation when they get home and, the kids are asleep, then that's totally fine. There's a place for that. Right. There is a space for those stories. There are a space for all our stories.
Now,
what I write is something different.
In her defense, she went and read his book, and it was Blue Eggs and Spam. I will not eat blue eggs and spam. I will not eat them. Damn, I am.
But, I took the same...
I would eat the Spam, but I was raised on it. So,
I did not have Spam until I was in, I was years old.
You were about 20. You were trying to figure things out.
And it was my first anniversary, and my husband and I went to Hawaii because our friends owned a short-term rental in Maui.
Nice.
And that was our wedding present from them. There's like, go stay in our place for a week. And so my first time eating Spam was actually in Hawaii, and it was the ABC Mart like Spam nigiri that my husband was like, you need to try this. And I was like, what is that abomination? He's like, no, he's like, close your eyes. I'm like, and it was like, boom, mind blowing. But what Earl was saying about the research and, why, like, my Lieben cycle, my cyberpunk books take longer to write. Mm-hmm. Because while I was writing Neon Lieben, a bunch of the technology that I was writing in as something that would be happening in the 2080s started happening. And I had to up my game. I had to readjust and re-identify and things like that. And I take that same kind of research into my Mythpunk series.